Very warm welcome, everyone. For those of you here in the room in Geneva, for those who are joining online, and for those who watch this later as a recording. We're here today to talk about what it takes to keep children safe in and through schools. Every child, every context, safe to learn. And we're going to be hearing some solutions and talking about how do we scale those solutions. I'm Howard Taylor. I'm Executive Director of the Global Partnership and Fund to End Violence Against Children. There are 11 co-hosts for this event. Forgive me, I'm not going to list you all now in the interest of time and the early morning start here in Geneva. Many of the co-hosts will be speaking. Leaders from the organizations will be speaking in the next 40 minutes or so. So we're going to focus this morning, as I say, on preventing and responding to violence against children in and through schools. And we're going to be going a little bit broader than some of the conversation yesterday here at this Education Cannot Wait high-level event, because we're going to be looking at education and violence against children and preventing that in and through schools along the continuum of peace to instability, from peace to conflict and to crisis as well, and looking at that broader continuum of which children go to school in. The format of today's event is going to be fairly fast moving. We have about 45 minutes. There are 14 speakers. Do the math. I'm going to have to be quite strict about how long people speak for. But the key piece is that we're going to be led by young people. So we're going to hear from 4 different young people, young leaders, and they are going to share solutions and ideas. And then we're going to hear from leaders across the sector responding to the ideas, to the solutions which the young people propose. So here we go, 14 speakers, 40 minutes, let's go. The first theme, and there are 4 themes, the first theme is gender. And I'm absolutely thrilled to invite Tabeth Chingwaru, who is a journalist, a girls' rights activist, just recently graduated from the University of Harare, and also a panel member of Youth for Education in Emergencies. And Tabeth is going to share with us the first solution. Tabeth.
Thank you. He has already stated my name. It's an honor for me to be here. And I think my solution is that young women and girls should be involved in policy formulation and policy monitoring, because what happens, the violence that occurs in schools mainly affects all of us. So I think that we have to be part of the policy formulation and even the policy implementation, as well as the policy monitoring. And I think that psychological violence mainly happens in schools. I think it's something that's overlooked, because when we look at it, young women and young boys don't really have opportunities to actually choose the curriculum or the subjects that they want to stay in. And I think the main problem comes from the community's socialization and the gender norms that we all experience. I say this because when a girl is zealous and passionate about learning about STEM subjects, they are seen as ambitious, and communities shun that kind of ambition. And the same happens with the young boys who are passionate about home economics subjects, and they are seen as weak. And I think it's something that communities have to be educated and nurtured into understanding that we are moving forward and everyone has the right to choose what works for them, because they are going out into the world where they'll have to give services and provide solutions to the problems that we are having in the world. I also want to stress a point of the school environment not being accommodative towards pregnant girls and young mothers. I've met with some of them, and they have stressed out that the school environment is not conducive. And again, we go back to socialization, where the teachers and their peers are coming from a community where they make it seem like the pregnant girls or the young mothers are the ones to blame for what happened to them, and they don't deserve to come back to school or stay in school. So I think that it's something that that also needs to be done. Policies are there in place, but it seems like the schools are not complying to them. And even when we have the policies, they are not enforced. So I think the other solution towards making schools a making schools safe is to enforce the policies and monitor them. I don't know if there are any systems in place where we can say, where we can see whether we are making progress in terms of making schools accommodative towards young mothers and pregnant girls. So another solution would be to have more resources in schools, because I think the other reason why we have why education is not gender transformative is because of scramble for resources. Because when a girl wants to embark on a journey in science subjects, they may be a second option to say the boys have to get these resources first, and the remaining ones then can be given to girls. And I think that if we actually do have resources, maybe the problem might lessen a bit. Thank you.
Can we give a thanks to Tabeth for that introduction? I thought we were going to get one solution, but I think we had about half a dozen there. But I heard a very strong focus on the inclusion of girls in policy making, etc. A particular focus on teenage mothers, and I think gender transformation, and then resources at the end. That's quite a lot for our two respondents and this, but thank you to Beth for kicking us off so strongly. The first respondent is Erik Broger Rasmussen, who is the permanent representative of Denmark to the United Nations in Geneva. Erik.
Thank you very much, and good morning. And before being appointed to this job, I was actually also head of mission at the Danish embassy in Harare. So I'm very happy to respond to Tabeth. And actually, there is a very strong educational policy in Zimbabwe if you compare to African countries. It's not bad, but I hear you. There are definitely room for improvement. Just a few points so that I will not take up all the time. One, yes, I think it makes a lot of sense what you said. You know, make sure that girls are included in policy making, monitoring, as you said. I mean, who are better placed than the ones that are living in the system every day? So that makes a lot of sense. You touched upon it. You didn't use the word violence, but I sense that you said that at least pregnant mothers are sort of subject to violence. I mean, violence cannot be accepted anywhere, in schools or elsewhere. But of course, if you're in a school and you are subject to violence, I mean, you cannot learn. It's obvious. So violence just simply has to stop. Then you said that we need to change norms in societies, and I think, and I would fully agree with you. That's probably also one of the most challenging things you can ask any society to do. It has to come from people like yourself. The younger generation has to insist that we want to change, but it's doable. It may take time, but it's perfectly doable. You also pointed to a very important critical fact in that. Make sure that it's not just the girls who's insisting. You want the boys to bring them along as well, because they are half of the population. If you don't get half of them to agree on the path, it'll be very difficult. So if girls and boys together say, yes, we want to change this society, we want to change the norms, then it's doable. And then finally on resources, yes, that's a critical issue. Obviously, there's lots of evidence out there. There is no better investment than investing in education. It gives the highest return on any dollar spent, be that in Zimbabwe or elsewhere. So you can basically not underestimate how much resources means to ensure that transformation. So thank you, Tabeth. Very good recommendation and ideas.
Great, Erik, thank you so much for that response to Tabeth and building on that. And that, I think the focus you gave a little bit there about norms, inclusion of obviously boys as well as girls in terms of what needs to change to end violence in schools. We're going to hear next from Robert Jenkins, who is the Global Director for Education and Adolescent Development at UNICEF. Rob.
Well, thanks, Howard. I know time is running. I just want to appreciate Tabeth's ideas and build on what Erik said. What I took also a key point you were raising, what I heard was the importance of monitoring implementation of the policies. And for me, I'm increasingly concerned about this policy to practice gap, meaning lots of documents, lots of statements, lots of decision makers saying the right things, but down on the ground, there's a lack of seeing that action translate into real change. And the monitoring, I think, of the policies, the implementation by girls themselves is, I think, a key piece of the solution. So I really appreciate that idea. You know, in the health sector, there's something called a verbal autopsy, or even a death audit. When there's a maternal death, a woman dies in childbirth, In some countries, there's a full analysis of how did that happen? Where did the mistakes occur? Who is responsible? And therefore, how do we prevent that happening again? Can we imagine if that could be the same for when there's an instance of violence at school? Is a discussion at the community level, at the school level, at the classroom level, amongst students themselves, but also all those who have been involved. Why did this happen? How did this happen? How do we prevent this from happening again? So really appreciate the idea of monitoring implementation by girls themselves. And thanks a lot, Tabitha.
Thanks, Rob, for those very important points. Policy to practice. We all want to see words go to action in this space for sure. Thank you. We're going to move swiftly on to the second theme of our 4. The second theme is diversity and tolerance in classroom and curriculum. And we're going to hear first from Falastin Mohammed Ali, who is a youth activist and member of Transform Education. And we're going to hear by video.
Hello, my name is Falastin. Thank you so much for the opportunity to offer solution to this conversation at Transform Education hosted by Angai and Shirili Skakuma. We are working to advance gender transformative education in all learning settings. Incorporating gender transformative education in schools helps to enable and support acceptance and diversity in teaching and learning practices can help to promote peaceful coexistence. Reducing violence in schools. This is particularly important in refugee education. In Kenya, refugee camps where there is a mixture of people from diverse cultures and backgrounds. Gender transformative education challenges gender stereotypes and promotes gender equality. This can be achieved by including discussions and lessons that can allow learners to think, to question and rethink gender roles and its implication in perpetuating school-related gender-based violence. It also provides an opportunity to learn about respect and consent, which are key elements to promoting peaceful practices in the classroom. By promoting a respect and understanding among all people, students are able to learn how to accept and appreciate differences, which can ultimately reduce the occurrences of the school-related gender-based violence. Additionally, including lessons on diversity and cultural awareness can promote understanding and respect for different cultures and religion and traditions. Students will be able to understanding cultural differences, and which can help to reduce xenophobia and other types of discrimination in the classroom towards refugees and migrants. In order to truly achieve gender transformative education in schools and in emergency settings, it's imperative that there be adequate teachers training and resources to equip teachers with the necessary skills on how to promote inclusive education for all. It's only through gender transformative education that we can ensure that students of all backgrounds can truly feel safe, valued, and respected in the classroom. And also, it can also be achieved by students and the teachers. Not only the students have to learn with the teachers, but the teachers also have to learn from the students, and from that we can all achieve community. Not only people have to learn about, at the end of the day, students not only have to learn about education and all the things, the subjects, they also have to learn how to be a responsible person in the society, and also how to be a community. If all of us work together as a community, we are gonna achieve this. But these all things cannot be achieved with an individual, but it can be achieved by all people. Thank you.
Fantastic. It's no surprise, but we really are getting a lot of detailed, fairly prescriptive and actionable solutions from our young people, our young leaders and survivors. Thank you, Falastin, for those, really focusing very clearly on gender transformative education, and also some ideas about broader awareness raising and even among refugee populations as well. Our first respondent now is going to be Laura Frigenti, the CEO of the Global Partnership for Education. Laura.
Well, thank you. And I have to say that Falastin said it so well that I have very little to add. But I think that the main point that really resonated with me is that education is much more than learning. Education creates good citizens and creates responsible people within society. So if that is the principle, the good or bad behavior that you learn in school are good or bad behavior that you will be inclined to replicate in society, in your communities when you grow up. So it is very important that you understand that we all live by now in societies that are very diverse, and that it is very, very important to make sure that there is respect for diversity, whether it is for gender, whether it is ethnicity, religion, race, all the dimensions. So two things that come to my mind that we, through our work in GPE, try really to do to achieve these objectives. The first one is obviously working on the curriculum. Curriculum, unfortunately, often present like stereotypes that lend themselves to support this tendency that people have to discriminate against what is diverse. So making sure that these stereotypes are eliminated is critical. And the second part that is very important is making sure that teachers are ready to respond in the classroom whenever they observe these behaviors. During my experience traveling in many countries, I have heard from students the fact that they were raising their voice and teachers really were not able to be of support to them. So I think that it's very, very important that we offer that strengthening of their ability to respond and to make sure that diversity is a value that is respected in the classroom. Thank you.
Fantastic. Laura, thank you so much for that. And I'm really building on what Palestine said in terms of the importance of curriculum, the importance of teachers as well being ready for that. Our next respondent, our next leader is Antara Ganguly, who is the director of the UN Girls Education Initiative. Antara.
Thank you, Howard, and thank you, Laura. I think the first thing I want to say is we're seeing an example of power inequality just by Palestine not being here. She didn't get her visa. So that's a very obvious example of inequality based on not just gender, but race and religion, and different powers that different countries in the world have. So building on that, I just want to bring us back to the point that both these young leaders have spoken about violence as a massive barrier preventing children from growing up to be productive and happy adults. And I really want to underline that violence, yes, it comes from the power inequality of gender, but it also very much comes from the power inequality of race, of religion, of tribal identity, of disability. And it intersects for the most vulnerable child in ways that we do not even see, because guess what? Children and adults are embarrassed and ashamed of speaking about violence. Just this week, there was a report from the US, the richest country in the world, where the CDC found that 14% of teen girls and 4% of teen boys reported rape in 1 year in 2021. This is not an unusual statistic. The regular baseline in the US is 11% for girls. And I can tell you, those of my colleagues who work in developing countries and in developed countries, that this is a baseline for the world. And so, yes, Eric, we do need to bring, in France, 25% of 20 to 24-year-old young men in January reported in an independent commission to President Macron that they feel that violence is appropriate to establish power. And 37% of young people reported forced sex. And this is in France. So it is global. It does happen in every country. And we really need to understand the different ways in which power is available and not available to individuals. And as a feminist and as a feminist organization, I just want to remind us that we shouldn't try to meet power with power. Empathy, love, respect, tolerance are way more powerful than an exercise of power. And I hope that with the leadership of these colleagues from these countries, we can remind ourselves of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Antara. And thanks for that reminder about the global nature of what we're talking about here, but the intrinsic power structures within society. And I love what you finished on about meeting power with empathy, etc. Really powerful, if I may say, in a soft power way. That's beautiful. The next session, we're switching now to the third theme of 4, halfway through. This is trauma-informed support and survivor leadership. And we're going to hear first by video link from Suresh Chehetri. Suresh is the country director of Healing Together Nepal. He's also a co-founder of the Brave movement of adult survivors of child sexual violence and abuse. And he's an advisory board member of the Safe to Learn Coalition. Suresh.
Thank you, Howard, for the introduction. My name is Suresh. I'm a survivor of childhood sexual violence at the hands of a teacher. I'm here today as a founding member of the BRAVE movement and executive director of Healing Together Nepal. BRAVE is a survivor-led movement advocating to end childhood sexual violence globally. Healing Together Nepal is a community-led organization that works to end cycle of violence and harm through healing and prevention work in schools and communities across Nepal. I also serve on the advisory board of the Safe to Learn Global Initiative. I grew up during Nepal's civil war and saw firsthand the impact of the conflict has on communities, families, and children. I was scared of the armed people, but eventually I realized that they need support to feel empathy and compassion. I'm a big believer in healing. Until we support people to understand themselves and their actions, we cannot stop sexual violence, harm, injustice, and conflict. This is not going to happen only with awareness and laws. We need to support people to change their hearts, and that is sustainable. I'm here to propose two solutions. First, we need to create safe, positive school settings where children are free from violence. Healing Together Nepal works with local government bodies to equip teachers and parents with the skills not only to heal, but also to prevent violence. The teachers are trained to implement life skills and leadership curriculum and work with students to establish a student council. They also work with students and parents to develop manifestos that promote positive and violence-free schools and homes. We need governments, international organizations, and funders to support the kind of work we do, schools and community-based work everywhere. Secondly, we need more survivor leadership and opportunities for survivors to guide solutions. We know what works to prevent violence. Adult survivors are untapped resource, and many of us are already leading work on prevention, healing, and justice. In our communities, we need national survivors councils in every country and survivors at the center of policymaking and at the table where decisions are being made. Thank you for listening. We can prevent violence in schools and everywhere when we act together. Let's be brave.
Really powerful words from Suresh there, as well as the practical solutions. I think that credibility and the lived experience and the voices of survivors, including survivors of abuse in school, speaking up, and that simple focus on prevention, healing, and justice. We're going to hear now, in response to that, from Dr. Kia Kabul-Kuok, who is the Undersecretary at the Minister of General Education and Instruction in the government of South Sudan. Doctor.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think this is a very interesting conversation, and I would like to put it in the context of South Sudan. As you all know, South Sudan is recovering from a 6-year conflict, exacerbated by communal conflict or fights. So you can see that availability of arms is commonplace, and you find sometimes situations where armed people could enter into a classroom and calling a teacher or looking for a people. So this is a real issue in our country, and therefore we endorsed Safe School Guidelines in 2015, and in 2021 we launched them together with Save the Children. And the aim of Safe School Guidelines is basically to protect schools from these armed groups. And as you can imagine, how often we get into negotiations with these various armed groups, asking them to leave schools. And you might have met my minister. She's a very brave woman, talking to people and asking them really to leave the schools. And what we have done in that is really try to empower people at different levels in terms of school safety. So there is training that happens in the school, and the training involves the PTAs, school management committees, teachers, parents, as well as students and local authorities. So what happens in most cases is that you talk to the commissioner of a county that this particular school is now being occupied by an armed group. And in most cases, will say, yes, they have left, but they might not have left the school. So you call the school headmaster and the PTA chair to ensure that the school is left. But of course, I think your participants have said a lot of good things. I think the most important thing is to go and look at the curriculum. For example, South Sudan is a diverse, ethnically diverse society with about 64 tribes. And what we tend to do is we tend to have an inclusive kind of curriculum. And we're lucky that we have a fresh new curriculum that we are developing. And in that curriculum, we try to teach children the importance of gender issues and the importance of being South Sudanese other than belonging to this particular tribe. So the idea of empowering young people, I think is important. The idea that we need also to look at, empowering schools and teachers is also important. But this is really a big issue because and it contributes to a lot of high dropout of girls in the school. Only 18% of girls that start primary school would finish secondary school at the end of 12 years. And that is because they don't feel safe when they are at school. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's already becoming apparent, certainly to me, as we hear from speakers, we hear from the young people with solutions, the youth survivors and leaders. We hear from leaders of international organizations. One group, and we hear from governments too, many sectors that clearly need to be involved in this effort to protect children in and through schools. One group we've heard they have a role, but we haven't heard from them yet is teachers. And I'm delighted to introduce Loyo Stella Oriang, who is a teacher representative from Education International.
Thank you so much. I'd like to start by appreciating Shuare's presentation. He highlighted a few things, and those are the things we are encountering at school. I would like to speak in the context from the country that I come from. It is still a country growing up, and partly violation of children is still there. People are aware children should not be violated, but sometimes they also feel it can happen for various reasons. At school level, we have teachers from diverse backgrounds, diverse cultures. Others are from places where violence is normal. So you realize that children go through violence a lot. At school level, we have been able to make sure children are as safe as possible by doing a few things. One, we want everyone to know that children are important, and as such, they should be respected. We are making sure we bring everyone on board. This has been possible through system strengthening, right from the top up to the bottom. We have been engaging the community, the parents, local leaders, school management, the PTA on the issue of child protection, because it is until a parent knows that my child is important, he or she would continue to treat the child as so. We have also been able to initiate and engage children in different school activities. These are activities that put children at the center of everything. These are school activities where children's voices come out onto the different things that they go through at school and also in the community. We have clubs and society. To name them, we have Child Rights Club, where children speak up for themselves. They tell us what they want us to do for them, and everything seems still to be moving on well. We have peer educators who help children, talk to them. Sometimes children even don't know they should not be violated. And as such, they sit on violations because to them, I think that is the norm of the society. But children are beginning to realize that, oh no, it is an offense to be violated. So I have also a responsibility. Children have responsibility to guard against violations. So we are highlighting them on what they should do in case such a thing happens. Life skills is very important. We are training children through life skill because I believe that is a tool that one can use to overcome violations. Like I put it, in other places, violation is normal. So we are advocating for strict policies and rules for perpetrators. Many times, perpetrators are left at large. Talk about any form of violence, you see perpetrators walk and pass and the child is there. So we want the government to take it up seriously to end violence against children by bringing perpetrators to book. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think you really brought into the room what we know conceptually, but you brought to life the criticality that teachers have in all of this alongside other actors. Really vital. Thank you for bringing that to life for us. We're going to move now into our fourth and final theme of this morning's conversation, which is safe learning in conflict. And we're going to hear first from Manu, who is a Save the Children youth activist from Nigeria. Manu.
Thank you very much. A very warm greeting to all beautiful personalities present here. My name is Manu, Speaker of Children's Parliament from Nigeria. Today, I'll be speaking to you about every child, every context, safe to learn, solution and scaling off. One Monday morning, I woke up and prepared to go to school as usual. On a busy street, with vehicles and people moving off and about, I met a boy, shivering and attaching his body to a wall. When I first looked him in the eyes, I saw everything. He is completely consumed by a complexity of life at that tender age, struggling for survival. I moved closer and asked, "Who are you and what are you doing here?" I got pleased to his immediate response, "Please help me." He said that with tears in his eyes. I helped him and directed him to a safe destination, but that was the only thing I can do. There are many of such children in every community globally, on the move without protection or parental care, no access to necessities of life and education, distanced from their families because of natural disaster or conflict. These children fend for themselves amid climate conditions, natural disaster, worsening insecurity. What happens to these children in the journey of life will determine the future. All children have dreams, but they are underprivileged and vulnerable. Children able to take part in education cannot wait 222 million dreams. For many of the poorest families, school remains a distant dream, too expensive, and children are forced to stay at home or subjected to forced labor. Families remain locked in the cycle of poverty from one generation to another. We are the future of our world, but we are very worried about what is happening now. One key issue for us is safe school. What does safe school and safe education mean to us? Friend safety, learning without limitation and positive emotion, but in the realities of our world, children are not experiencing that. We are scared when military equipment passes outside the windows of our schools and when we hear the sound of explosions and bombs. We are scared when educational institutions are used for military purposes. We do not want to be scared any longer. We want to feel safe and stop worrying about ourselves, our family members, and our friends. My call to action, which is our solution. Forgive me, I can't say it while I'm sitting down. First, improve funding for education. 2, support conflict and natural disaster countries to promote continuity of learning of all children. All children have right to a safe and a quality education, regardless of where they live or their personal circumstances. We need change. Thank you very much.
Wow, Mano, thank you for bringing that lived experience right into the room here. And I hope that translates to those who are watching online or watching this as a recording. That was so powerful and a reminder why we are all collectively trying to do what we're trying to do here. But that lived experience, that prescription for action is just incredibly powerful. Thank you. You've moved our hearts as well as our heads and our minds, which is so vital in this important work. We're going to hear from two respondents now to Manu. The first is Veronica Zambrano, who is the Latin America Sub-Regional Director from Plan International. Veronica.
Thank you very much, Manu. Very impressive story. And the story that you told us, so unfortunate and so sad. Millions of children, boys and girls, live around the world. I come from the Latin American region. I come from Ecuador, and we are suffering from as never before in our history, for migration from the Venezuela countries to the countries in Ecuador, Colombia, Peru. And they are also going up into the frontiers with Mexico for the American dream. I used to work in Honduras, and I saw caravans every day coming out because children didn't have anything to eat. Families were living under violence. And this shivering boy that you were telling us that was in the world that you saw in the streets, we see them also in Latin America. So even if we are in Nigeria, or if we are in any region of the world, we see these crises every day. And as you say, we need to have funding for education. We need to make sure that these children, independent of the crisis that they are suffering, they need to have the right for education, because education is the only way that will break the vicious cycle of poverty, the vicious cycle of exclusion. And I think that Manu is an example of what we have done, some organizations that are here sitting today, because you went to secondary school and now you are a leader, and now you're here and telling us high and loud, how do we have to change? How do we have to have safe schools? How do we have to, independent of the crisis that we have in Haiti, the crisis that we have in the North Triangle, in Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, all of those children, all of those girls have to suffer. And Taved has told us what happened with the girls and how gender-based violence is even worse when we have this crisis. So I think that I want to close with this wonderful phrase that one of the leaders says: teachers have to learn from children, and we do need also to learn from you. We need to listen to you. We need to be able to have this opportunity to be with you together, and to really, you have to keep us accountable of what we do. And we have to learn every day of everything that you have to tell us. And I am so proud to work in Plan International, where we do that with youth and with girls leading and standing strong to change the world. We need to make a better place for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Veronica. And our second respondent here in this section, looking at safe to learn in the context of conflict, is Chrissy Hart, Director of Policy and Advocacy from Together for Girls. Chrissy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your intervention. You've gotten straight to the heart of why we're here today. And I want to talk just a little bit about what Together for Girls is doing to heed your call to action to ensure that every child in every context has access to safe schools. So Together for Girls is a partnership of national governments, of UN entities, and the private sector. And we work to prevent violence against children and to ensure healing and justice for survivors. So we support the implementation of nationally representative surveys on violence against children. These are called the Violence Against Children and Youth Surveys, or the VACs. They are led by national governments with technical support from the US Centers for Disease Control and UNICEF, and they measure the prevalence, consequences, and risk and protective factors for violence against children. So we've conducted secondary analyses of the VACs across Africa, Europe, and Latin America to understand specifically violence that occurs in and around school settings. And what we know is that this violence is often perpetrated by classmates and teachers, but the data also shows us that education is a critical pathway for violence prevention. The greater a student's educational attainment, the less likely they are to condone violence and the social and specifically the gender norms, to Antra's earlier points, that drive it. VACS data also reveals what we all know to be true, that education is a critical pathway for violence prevention. So at Together for Girls, we recently worked with CDC, the IRC, and UNHCR to develop the VACs for use in protracted humanitarian and displacement contexts. And we have piloted the first humanitarian, or HVACs, in Uganda this past year. It was implemented in refugee settlements by Population Council and the African Population and Health Research Center in partnership with the government of Uganda and UNHCR. So those findings will be presented to the government of Uganda later this year, and we intend to analyze those as we have the traditional VACs to better understand how to ensure safe education for children and adolescents across all contexts, and specifically the most vulnerable contexts. So on behalf of TFG, I want to say to you, Manu, to Beth, to everyone who's intervened today, that we commit to continuing to use these data and the evidence that we do have, because we do know what works across so many contexts to prevent violence and to ensure safe education along the development and humanitarian continuum. And we commit to using these data to underscore and uplift your voices, the voices of survivors like Suresh, the voices of educators, and the voices of community-based organizations who we know often implement and understand the most effective pathways to violence prevention and to ensuring safe education for all children. Thank you so much for your interventions, and thanks to all of you for being here today.
Thanks so much, Christy. I think it's really powerful to nearly finish on that important point about the criticality of data, but data in the use to inform action, to empower those who are at the forefront of this in all those different categories. That's really powerful. Thank you. We're going to now hear from one of our co-hosts here in Geneva in these 2 days, which is from Education Cannot Wait. We're going to hear from Michelle May, who is an education specialist, who is going to share some closing reflections and thoughts. Bring us home, Michelle.
Thank you, Howard. Wow, is all I have to say. We have so much work that we need to do. And Manu, as you said, we need change. And so I please ask that you hold us to the task and hold us accountable. That's clearly needed. Just a few closing reflections. There were so many things that are at the heart of ECW and Safe to Learn's work here. Life skills, mental health, empathy, taking beautiful words and translating that into real change on the ground. How do we do that? Well, as some of you may know, Safe to Learn and ECW, as well as 11 important partners, including Ungai, Plan, and others who are here today, came together and created this joint guidance note on, here we go, our guidance note on how do we embed protection into education. And so there are some practical steps that you can access by using the QR code. I think that everybody has access to. This will lead you to End Violence's page, as well as key resources, including the new guidance note. The guidance note is meant for ECW grantees on the ground to ways to consider how to embed and integrate protection better into education from the planning stage, design, into implementation, as well as monitoring and evaluation. And of course, that includes making sure that we include youth in these processes to hold us accountable. So I just wanted to say thank you to Howard and End Violence and Safe to Learn for this great event, as well as the partners who created this guidance note, as well as the children and youth who have fed into the guidance note. So I really do encourage you all to take action. One small step on this very important path is to go to the QR code, download the guidance, and then also continue the conversation, because this is, just the beginning. There's a lot of work to be done. So thank you all for coming today.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Let me just echo Michelle's thanks, particularly to our young leaders sharing their solutions, to the respondents, the leaders, the speakers, for all of you coming in the room, for those of you watching online, for those of you watching this recording in future. I think so many powerful thoughts, but I think that policy to practice, from words to action to change, and what we heard about some of these lived experiences of experience of violence and abuse in and around schools, and how we take that where children are afraid, where children are scared, to a place where they are safe to learn. And also we know that if we can get children safe to learn, it's part of a broader journey to protect children, to prevent and respond to violence and abuse of children. So we have our work cut out, but a big thank you to everyone. And that's the end of this side event. Thank you.